Something brought you here today. Not an algorithm, not a coincidence. Something in you, a quiet, persistent part of you that has been watching and waiting, guided you to press play on this video at this exact moment in your life. And if you're the kind of person who feels things deeply, if you've always sensed more than others around you could see, if you've carried a weight inside you that you've never been able to fully explain to anyone, then what you're about to hear was written for you. Because there is a version of you that already knows everything needs to change. It has been whispering to you, in the silence after an argument that left you hollow. In the 3 a.m. moments when the mask finally comes off and you're left alone with the truth of how you've been living. In the inexplicable grief of standing in the middle of a life that looks perfectly fine from the outside and feeling absolutely nothing on the inside. You've been ignoring that whisper, not because you're weak, not because you don't care, but because the human mind has a near-genius ability to protect itself from the very transformation it most desperately needs. This is a video about that protection, about the psychological walls we build around our pain, about why the most sensitive, most aware, most emotionally intelligent people are often the ones who stay stuck the longest, and about the moment documented by one of history's greatest minds, Carl Jung, when the soul finally stops running from itself. If this video found you today, it did not find you by accident. Carl Jung spent decades studying the deepest layers of the human psyche. He worked with thousands of patients, brilliant people, sensitive people, people who felt the weight of the world in ways others simply couldn't comprehend. And again, he noticed something that haunted him. The people who suffered most were not the cruel or the careless. They were the ones who felt everything, the ones who absorbed the emotions of every room they walked into, the ones who gave endlessly their time, their energy, their compassion, until there was nothing left to give, and still found a way to give more. Jung understood something about these people that most psychology still hasn't fully grasped. Their greatest strength, their depth of feeling, their sensitivity, their capacity for empathy, had become the very cage that kept them trapped. Because when you feel everything, you also absorb everything. Every criticism becomes a wound. Every rejection becomes evidence of a story you've been telling yourself since childhood, that you are somehow not enough, that you must keep earning your place in the world, that if you just give a little more, try a little harder, shrink yourself a little smaller, maybe then you will finally be safe. Jung called this the persona, the carefully constructed mask we wear to protect ourselves from the world's judgment. For deeply sensitive people, this mask becomes so convincing, so perfectly maintained, that they eventually forget there is a face beneath it. And the tragedy is this: the more perfectly you maintain the mask, the more disconnected you become from the only thing that can actually heal you. Your real self, the one you stopped listening to a long time ago. Here is one of the most uncomfortable truths in all of psychology. People do not stay in painful situations because they are weak. They stay because the pain has become familiar. And familiar, even when it destroys you slowly, registers in the brain as safe. Psychologists call this the status quo bias, the deeply wired human tendency to prefer the known over the unknown, not because the known is good, but because it is predictable. Because the brain, running a survival program written 50,000 years ago, will always choose a familiar suffering over an unfamiliar freedom. This is why you stay in the job that drains your soul year after year. Why you remain in relationships long after the love has quietly died. Why you carry the same inner monologue, I am not enough, I am too much, I do not deserve more than this, even when every part of your conscious mind knows it isn't true. But here is what Jung understood that changed everything. This is not weakness. This is not failure. This is your psyche doing exactly what it was designed to do. The unconscious mind stores every wound, every fear, every identity you were handed by people who were also afraid. Jung called this the shadow, not the evil part of you, not the broken part, but the hidden part. The part that was told to be quiet. The part that learned early that certain feelings were dangerous, certain needs were too much, certain versions of yourself were not welcome. And the shadow does not disappear when you ignore it. It grows. It begins to direct your choices from beneath the surface, pulling you back toward familiar pain every time you come close to something new, whispering the old stories every time you dare to imagine a different life, sabotaging every attempt at change with one devastating question. Who do you think you are? That voice is not the truth. It is the echo of every person who was too small to hold the fullness of who you actually are, like standing at a door that is just beginning to open. But something happens. At some point, and no one can predict exactly when, but Jung believed it was inevitable for those willing to look inward, the pain of staying becomes greater than the fear of changing. He called this the threshold moment. For some, it arrives as a sudden rupture, a loss, a betrayal, a diagnosis, a relationship that ends and takes a version of yourself with it. For others, it is quieter, a Tuesday morning, an ordinary moment. You look in the mirror and something behind your eyes simply says, "This is not the life I am supposed to be living." Both are valid. Both are the soul doing its most important work. Dweck, the Stanford psychologist who spent 30 years studying human potential, discovered something that reframes everything we think we know about change. The people who transform their lives do not do so because they suddenly become braver, or more disciplined, or more motivated. They transform because something fundamental shifts in how they see themselves. Dweck called this the movement from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. But understand, this is not a simple attitude adjustment. This is not positive thinking. This is a complete restructuring of your psychological identity. A fixed mindset tells you that who you are is already determined, that your wounds define you, that the ceiling you've been living under is the actual ceiling of what your life can be. A growth mindset, the one that emerges when you finally turn to face your shadow, tells you something completely different. That who you are is not a destination you've already arrived at. It is a becoming, a continuous, living, unfinished process of emerging into yourself. And that process does not begin when you feel ready. It begins the moment you decide the old story is no longer worth defending. There is something that keeps even the most self-aware people from making the leap. It is not laziness. It is not a lack of knowledge. Most of the people watching this video have read the books, listened to the podcasts, understood the concepts intellectually. The real barrier is something Jung identified with surgical precision: identity conflict. You cannot sustain a behavior that contradicts your self-concept. not long-term. The mind will dismantle it every time, not out of cruelty, but out of loyalty to the story it believes is true about you. If somewhere deep in your unconscious you carry the belief that you are someone who suffers, then peace will feel like a performance you're waiting to be caught in. If you believe you are someone who is always abandoned, then love will feel like a countdown. If you believe that your worth must be earned through sacrifice and pain, then rest will feel like failure. These are not your beliefs. Let me be very clear about that. These are the beliefs of every person who ever made you feel that your natural self was not enough. The parent who needed you to be smaller. The teacher who couldn't see you. The partner who took your sensitivity and called it weakness. You absorbed their limitations and stored them in the deepest part of yourself. And then you spent years, perhaps decades, living inside the walls they built in you. Jung's entire life work pointed toward one liberating truth. Those walls are not you. The first act of real change, the only act that actually works, is not to try harder. It is to descend into yourself and ask, with genuine honesty, whose voice is this? Whose fear am I carrying? Whose story have I mistaken for my own? That question, asked with courage and answered with honesty, is the beginning of what Jung called individuation. The lifelong process of becoming, fully and consciously, who you actually are. What does real transformation actually look like in the human mind? Not the performance of change, not the vision board and the morning routine adopted for 3 weeks before the old patterns flood back in. The real thing. Neuroscientist Dr. Tali Sharot's research at University College London revealed something that turns conventional self-improvement completely on its head. The brain does not mobilize around shame. It does not respond to the constant reminder of what is broken in you. It does not change because you have identified every flaw and committed to fixing them. The brain mobilizes around possibility. This means the most powerful question you can ask yourself is not what is wrong with me. It is who am I in the process of becoming. That single shift activates an entirely different architecture in your mind. Instead of the threat detection circuitry that produces anxiety, paralysis, and self-sabotage, you engage the reward and motivation systems, the parts of your brain that make you lean forward, that make you feel alive, that make the next step feel possible rather than terrifying. The people who change, truly change, do not begin with a perfect plan. They begin with a different story. A story where the next chapter is not a slightly improved version of the last one, but a genuinely different quality of life. And then they do something that requires more courage than almost anything else. They begin to act as if that story is already true, not in a delusional way, in an intentional way. They ask, in the small moments, in the ordinary decisions of an ordinary day, what would the person I am becoming do right now? And they do that, imperfectly, repeatedly, without waiting to feel ready. Because readiness is not a feeling that arrives before transformation. It is a feeling that follows it. If you have stayed with this video until this moment, something in you recognized itself in these words. That recognition is not random. It is the part of you that is already different from the person who pressed play. Jung believed that the most courageous act available to a human being is not to conquer the world outside them. It is to descend into themselves, into the shadow, into the wound, into the stories that were never theirs to carry, and choose, quietly and without fanfare, to no longer be defined by them. You do not need a catastrophe to begin. You do not need to hit the lowest point. You do not need permission from anyone who has never had the courage to look at themselves the way you are looking at yourself right now. The only thing that has ever been required for a human life to transform is a single, honest, quiet moment of decision. This is not who I am anymore. That moment does not announce itself. It does not come with certainty or confidence or a clear picture of what comes next. It comes as a whisper, the same whisper that has been speaking to you for longer than you realize, the one that brought you here today. If this video found you, it found you because some part of you is finally ready to listen. And that is not a small thing. That is everything.